how to destroy parts of the electrical grid, water systems, airlines, and things. We were doing things like trying to figure out how to bankrupt the airline industry. We were trying to figure out how to destroy generators. One of the projects I got to work on was on centrifuges for a while. And so
you wrote stuff.
if you go out online, it does say that, but that's not true. I just had fortunate to say about Stuxnet in a paper. If you read a paper, I actually wrote this stat attack out in a paper and published it, and then Stuxnet followed the same attack. So, so critical infrastructures are everywhere. I mean, this is a huge problem around the world. Back in the early 90s, I was working at the Pentagon, and one of my friends, Win Swartow, coined the phrase a digital Pearl Harbor. And that was a long time ago. And it came down now, the last one to say it was Leon Panetta, the former director of the CIA. And it became a thing. We still haven't had a digital Pearl Harbor. Attacking the critical infrastructures isn't easy. I mean, Stuxnet took multiple years to try to write and get correct, and it still had some flaws, and that's why it was found, because of a flaw. The issue is all critical infrastructure is not the same. So if you try to attack an electrical grid somewhere, you may cause a little blip in the electric grid, but if you had the time and effort to do it, you could identify key nodes in the electrical grid or water systems and cause a major problem. So you have to do a lot of research right there. So pretty much everything out there today is connected, and it's a major thing. The shipping cranes right here, I did a project on shipping cranes, and one of the things with the shipping cranes, these shipping cranes normally come from South Korea. They normally take 5 years or better to get these cranes built and shipped. These things are all computerized, and you can actually cause these things to wreck into the side of a ship if you do a right attacking it. You can cause it to swing to a ship and cause damage on the ship and create problems. And automation, we know about automation. Internet of Things. Anyone ever used X10 back in the day? X10 people? So X10, when I had my house in Charlotte, I had X10 in there. And this is before the Internet of Things concept. An X10, you could, sit in your bed and turn the lights on and turn your lights off and everything else. Well, one of the projects that I did at my house was to take one of those off and put on an isolated area and try to run, make it cycle faster. And you know what happens when it cycles too fast on a mechanical relay? It catches fire. So that's the big thing about, back then people didn't think about that, but now we got these Internet of Things, like, when I was in Charlotte, I had my lights were connected, my thermostats were connected, my TV, I had private television channels in my house. I had 66% of my utilities were connected to the internet. So I had a smart meter outside and a smart water meter. And so everything was potentially hackable there. And like one of my friends about Internet of Things, he had this high-tech bread machine one time, that was connected to the internet, and he could program and stuff. And I was able just to walk up to his Internet of Things device and hit the buttons on it, and in the wrong sequence, and crashed it and broke it. Right? Bricked his bread machine. So in the future here, there's going to be so many things that are in your house. Like a washing machine. You go downtown today at Lowe's, and you can buy a washing machine that will send you a message your clothes are done. I don't care if my clothes are done. I'm willing to listen for it. But, do I need to worry about milk or something like that? So when you start deploying things in your own house, you have to worry about it. I had a meal down here at a restaurant in Asheville the other day, and I pulled out my phone, and it said, would you like to connect to the thermostat? Enter the password, and I'm thinking, I wonder if it's the default password for this product. You can imagine sitting in a restaurant and turning up the air or something in the restaurant. But there's other things with Internet of Things that you may not talk about. Privacy is a big problem with Internet of Things. There's a thing called personal identifiable information, and you can use that. I wrote a project one time called Patterns of Life. And so if you take that data that's coming off your Internet of Things, you can actually build a pattern of life of a person. And so if vendors are collecting this data, they know when you wash clothes, they know when you they know when you walk by your thermostat. When you walk by a Nest thermostat, it'll come on. So Nest knows, Google knows when you walk by the thermostat that you're home, right? They can pick that up. And anytime you're doing some of these things at home with these Internet things, when you turn on your Hue lights, Philips knows, that you use that Hue device, especially because you're using their app. The future is already here. We already know that Charlie. This actually is from a presentation I gave in Berlin 5-6 years ago about the future was going to hack cars. And Charlie and one other guy recently did something for Jeep and hacked the Jeep. He bricked his Jeep a couple times, had to take it in. But the thing is, when you start looking at some of these cars today, Charlie actually had to have physical access to the car to modify it. He couldn't do it remotely. But in the future, it's going to be possible to do some of these attacks remotely. DARPA and several other people in DHS are looking to improve cybersecurity in cars. But one of the things that I haven't seen happen yet, which I would love to see happen, is electrical cars. Is when you go to an electrical charging station and you plug your car in. How many of you thought about putting malware inside the charging station, because that's the computer that's connecting to that car to put that power in there, and it monitors that. How would you like to be able to hack into that station, put that stuff into the car, and then send a piece of malware over there into the car, right? Or how many of you thought when you go into Hertz to rent a car, is take a USB and plug it into the car to upload some songs in there, but put some malware on there, and next time the technician comes in there to plug in, you get his USB drive gets infected and goes into the fleet. And then have something like they call like Charlie's type thing, shut the car down on a certain date. And imagine how that would impact Hertz. These are type of attacks that could occur. How many customer records are lost? I've had my credit card, and I'm a cybersecurity guy, I had my credit card information stolen at least 24 times now. And been involved in so many data breaches, this is crazy. And it infuriates me every time I get a notice in the mail that I've been involved in a data breach, because the first thing I think of is who failed in this job. What cybersecurity guy, what database administrator, what developer, what QA person, what manager, who failed to do this? Target breach. The Target breach, when they attacked the POS systems, Target was not using a detection system that would tell them that they had software being installed on these POS systems with administrator rights. They could have had a simple program written, not even a commercial program. They could have written their own program and installed on these systems, and they could have alerted them when that software got put on that system. And they would have known about the attack that quick. That's laziness. That's what that is. You don't have to buy $1 million product to fix a simple problem. Locked out. This is a big commonplace now. The hospital right here in Asheville, Mission, was, they had a couple months back, they had a big, after this was going on in California, they had a big attack here, people trying to get in the hospital here. It's a pretty simple attack. Someone breaks into your system, they install software, they encrypt your files, and they ransom them all for Bitcoin. It became, once this hospital paid, then it became pretty commonplace. These hospitals are going to pay. How do you get around this attack? Having backups, right? If you have backups, you get around this attack. How would an attacker improve this attack? Damage and corrupt your backups. So it can stay for many months and corrupt your backups and then do it, and they can make more money doing it. Now, one of the things I've done a lot over the years is I do a lot of research on these hacktivist groups and nation-state attacks. If you go out and look online, you'll see I did a bunch of stuff on cyber warfare and these type of events. So let's delete everything. The first one that we really know about was Saudi Aramco, right? Saudi Aramco here. It used a commercial product that was freely available, that you could download with a 30-day key, and it was from a company in the UK. The developer, whoever it was, downloaded it, tweaked it, tested it, and with this 30-day period, and launched it, and wiped out 30,000 computers at Saudi Aramco. Right? He launched the attack on a major holiday. Right? It was a major holiday in Ramadan. He launched the attack on that holiday when everyone was off, and it erased the computers. So many people got fired from this incident. Right? And the company that sold the commercial software actually made some modifications so you could no longer register with Yahoo, Gmail, or something else. You had to use a corporate account to get the software from them. A little bit. Cue the voice here. This is Sony, allegedly North Korea, and this was allegedly Iran. North Korea here, let's say, is Sony. Guess what they used? They used the same software. But what? Trend Micro, Maccabee, Symantec, and everyone else went out and made sure that that version of software used here couldn't be used again. But guess what? There were 22 other versions before this that worked, that were freely available. And so this hacker picked a version that wasn't being blacklisted by Symantec or McAfee or Trend, and then used it here to erase the computers. And when I spoke with my friend that was the Chief Information Security Officer at Trend, I said, why didn't y'all go out and go get all these samples of the stuff and block it? And he goes, well, we never thought about that. I mean, well, why not? You didn't think someone used the one version, all the other 22 worked also. Why didn't you block those? And now we've got the problem now with ransomware. And, now we kind of know that they can use these commercial software products here. But over here, they're not using any commercial software. They're leveraging stuff on their own systems now. I mean, most of us have PowerShell running in our system. We all still have Batch running in our system, right? The basic Windows commands. But some of these are, like this one here is leveraging PowerShell. And this one, they've got a new thing right now. They just delete all your files and tell you to buy them back. They don't exist. They're erasing them all. And just put a message up on your computer, hey, buy your files, they're gone. And they send you information, hey, this is how you get your files, but they're gone. So how many of you have even, built something on your systems to see when PowerShell is being used, right? Even if it's administrator or non-administrator, some of this stuff doesn't require administrator rights. Cue the digital voice. Originally Anonymous was about doing stuff in Australia. And if they one of the first things they ever did, one of the first operations Anonymous did, they did a thing where they sent out these pornography photos of girls with small breasts, right? And that was the first thing they ever did. Now this has actually moved to a whole other realm. And Anonymous itself has been co-opted by so many people. And co-opted means that people put themselves under this umbrella and say they're anonymous, but they're not anonymous. They're nation-state actors and other things. This operation here, Operation Independence for Ukraine, it goes back and forth. Are they pro-Ukrainian? They're pro-Russian. It all depends on what they play out with. Same with here. This is anti-Russia. And this was a very interesting one. This is all these are kind of related to Ukraine. This right here was very interesting. There was a group that took place down in Crimea. It stood up. It was a hacker organization. It came up online pretty quick. It set up a website. It had all the correct themes and symbols, and it was hacking these sites with it was actually Nazi propaganda. If you ever follow this stuff, when Russia attacks a country, they try to use Nazism to actually say these people are bad, and they use this over and over and over, right? So they hacked all these websites there, 200 and something websites throughout the country, and put this propaganda up there. The bad thing is if you work in incident response, threat intelligence, or any of these things, before you fix your computer that's been hacked, please collect intelligence. Collect something off of it so people can come back and figure out how it was hacked, what kind of potentially automated script, because it had to be an automated script for 200 systems to be hacked, in minutes, right? But when you try to collect any information about some of these hacks, no one had it, because when you talk to some of the companies, they just, rebuilt their systems and didn't collect anything for it. But so this was a very interesting thing here. This was, after Estonia was attacked in 2007, they stood up a NATO center called the CCDCOE, which is kind of a think tank for NATO for cybersecurity. And what happened here is this organization here, which is allegedly pro-Ukrainian, it's really Russian. This organization here launched a major denial of service attack against the CCDCOE in Estonia, because they just hit them. But not only did that, they also took out NATO's primary website, right? For 24 hours, NATO was offline. NATO's primary website was offline. They couldn't get it up because whoever this group was, which had a lot of bandwidth, was able to knock these guys out. And the CCDCOE got this, knocked offline, and they had to move to Cloudflare eventually. But that took them like 9 days to move all their stuff over, which was a standard website. But the thing here is interesting. You have the bird of prey here, and the snake, and it's kind of this opposition. I'm going to eat you. This is what the symbology is. So hacktivism. How many of you actually follow hacktivists? 1, 2. Okay. So we all know about the Syrian Electronic Army. They had their heyday a couple of years back. A couple of attacks that were notable was like when they took the New York Times offline. The New York Times should have had a way to know that their DNS was being co-opted. Oh my gosh. And why wasn't it in Australia? Why wasn't it someplace else? Why didn't it have better two-factor authentication on it? All these things. And it was just crazy it happened. And they took the New York Times offline for what? 2 days, I think it was. Took the New York Times like 2 days to do it. So here's the thing with the Syrian Electronic Army, they did that. Some disaster recovery stuff here is the New York Times could have used IP addresses, and had a secondary fallback site with secondary, domain name and tweeted stuff about here's our news stories. They had no plan, so it all fell apart for the New York Times. Anon Goes is an organization that always attacks Israel, usually always on September 11th. They always do these things. Operation Israel Reborn. The thing is, if you've done threat intelligence, which I do occasionally, these two groups are the same groups. They registered their websites. Back in the back, if you start looking at some of the data, you can find 1 or 2 data points that actually link these two groups together. A small piece of data links these two together. They're the same group. Right here is another one of the other groups. And when you're doing analysis on this, but this is another hacktivist group, alleged hacktivist group. I mean, this photo right here is from the Punisher. This scarf they're wearing right there is a red checkered scarf. This is a symbol of Hamas, and this symbol here actually says, "There is no God, but Muhammad is the messenger of God." Espionage isn't really new. I mean, we've been doing it for a while. I've been banned from a DoD conference because I gave a lecture there on how to footprint and steal information from Lockheed Martin, and I was banned from the conference for life. Well, they should have protected their systems. The good thing out of it, after Lockheed Martin threatened to sue me, they decided they were going to start a counterintelligence program. So that was a good thing. They started a counterintelligence program, but all the information that was available was free, online. I couldn't help it that I found someone that was taking joint strike fighter documents and putting them on their iPod and under Aretha Franklin's greatest hits and not stripping the metadata back out before they put it back into the network. So that was the little thing. So there's a lot of stuff about this espionage thing. It's nothing new. We got saber rattling, which is another issue. North Korea's big in this. One of the first attacks was on July 4th many years ago. North Korea knocked out the State Department. It knocked out the CIA. It knocked out several major government agencies with a denial of service attack. And most of those government agencies eventually left their service provider. I think they belong to Alchemy now, but I don't know who they were before. They left that service provider and moved over. And this has become a big issue because North Korea is blamed for a lot of stuff. We come in peace. My claim to fame is the Georgian attack. I did a lot of analysis on that, and I got a classified paper on that that this government took. This was the first military operation that we know about that used cyber as a preparatory phase. So it launched a cyber attack and took out pieces of communication architecture that the president and others would communicate with their population about Russia storming across the border. And that was the first time. And the attacks lasted, they started when the operation took off, hours before. It lasted all the way till they signed a peace accord and they stopped, right? The Russian military still has occupation in South Ossetia, which is up north that they took control of. But how does allegedly hackers run an operation that starts right before a military operation, and how do those hackers also stop right when the military operation, right when the peace accord goes? It doesn't happen, right? They also had back to forensics and threat intelligence. They also had a digital image they put online, and this is what I'm saying about collect intelligence. They had a digital image online, and that they used to do for propaganda. And so I was able to trace that image back and find the original image in a repository online. And that image was created this attack occurred in 2008. That image was actually created in 2006 at another period of time that Russia and Ukraine were in turmoil. It was already pre-prepared for an operation that never got used. So when you're collecting intelligence, you got to look at everything. The invasion here, the same thing. Blackouts, all the military took off their stuff. We had all kinds of similarities between here. A group stood up here. Is this as fast as this one? A group stood up and started doing cyber attacks like I was just talking about. The interesting thing here, Putin always said that there was no Russian military in there, but there's a great video online that I found. It was from France. It was shooting in Crimea, and when you still framed it, all the guys were wearing armbands, and so they had some type of show of leadership. And the key thing they had a certain weapon that's only issued to Russian Spetsnaz forces carrying it around the street. So they should have gotten other weapons and not carried Russian Spetsnaz weapons. So this was a big deal. Cyber warfare, is it real or fantasy? There's been many books written about this. Richard Clarke wrote the first one. Several of my other friends have written books about this. Is it real? Cyber warfare is real. The question is, will we ever have it, and what cyber warfare will be? Cyber will always be part of military operations in the future, but it's pretty real because, we talk about USB keys dropped, and it wasn't really a USB key. I mean, it took out the Iranian nuclear program, right? It wasn't just a USB key. I mean, they had to actually attack and install Stuxnet in computer systems all through Iran and certain key facilities, and that software then was picked up by someone on a USB key because it was programmed to jump to a USB key and only move 3 times, and then once it moved 3 times, it deleted itself. So so that's the way it hopped. Okay, so it started in one place and moved on, and eventually it got to the nuclear program and took out. But also with this, if you paid attention to this, there was key assassinations and all kinds of stuff that went on. Great minds.
if you ever made shade charges, they made this great shade charge that stuck on a vehicle and only blew up inside the vehicle and killing the occupants, having no collateral damage outside. Professional. Cyber terrorism, I've been writing about this for years. Cyber terrorism is going to happen eventually. It's going to get to the point. Many years ago, I was writing a program, a digital mousetrap program to catch insiders, and I was having a problem with it, and I posted it online to get someone to correct it. And this guy from Syria downloaded it, corrected it, made it much more efficient, and then I traced him back, and he was sitting in this room, and he had flags of these terrorist organizations on his wall, and his poor bud sitting around thinking, that's going to be the future. Eventually, those guys will become attackers and figure this out. We could, if someone wanted to, we could co-opt and have terrorism start cyber terrorism. It would be very easy to do. The only thing you would have to do to get to this point is create an application that would be a denial service application or something else, and ask for a cyber jihad for people to use the application worldwide. There are millions of people that donate their computers for this, and it would be impossible to stop it. It just hasn't made it to that leap yet because cyber terrorism doesn't sell like a suicide bomber or a guy in Munich walking around with a gun. It doesn't sell. But the world is screwed, right? I mean, I've been in this business so many years, and I constantly see that we have problems. When I used to be a pen tester, I'd go in and we would break into a place, and I would have the CISO say, you shouldn't have been able to break in because we just spent $1 million on a product. You shouldn't have been able to get in. And I'd say, well, why didn't you teach your developers to write better code? Why didn't you have a better QA process? Why didn't you have this? And he just look at me. I'm like, those are the things you should spend your money on. And this is what I've learned over the years. We're the problem. We are the problem. It's not. We sometimes, and I know guys that do this. I asked some developers to write some code. I told them to make, parameterized SQL statements. We need to make sure we remove certain hidden files and all this stuff. And the developers didn't listen. And then someone hacked it. And I was like, why didn't you take the time to do this? And he said, it costs time. What, an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes is going to cost, and you want to get it out, and that 10 or 15 minutes could lead to a data breach, right? So we're the problem. We have to figure out how to fix ourselves. And a lot of times when I go to corporations, and when I was doing pen tests and security assessments, I always find the processes in that corporation are bad. They don't have solid processes in development and other things. Networking architecture, they don't have solid processes on networking architecture or log management or any of those things. And some of those things are free. Really, to come to build a process, it takes time, but once you get it built, it's kind of a free thing that can keep rolling. So, the thing here, how do we improve ourselves? And this is one thing here. You cannot see these words. All right, dim the lights. Still can't see them.
Wow, still.
Yeah, so here's the thing here is I want to do this from an attacker viewpoint, and it says instruments of battle are valuable only if you know how to use them. And that's true. You have to know how to use the instruments that the hackers are using. And I hate to use the word, it's really criminals that are using against you. It's not really hackers, they're criminal elements, cyber criminals from Russia or Ukraine or Estonia or China or someplace else that are using against you. And all these tools are normally freely available online that they're using. Some of them just go out to GitHub and take code and parse code together and attack them too. So you need to take tools. If you go out to OWASP and download Directory Buster, right, to see what kind of directories in your system, you need to do that and learn. That's from the attacker. That's what the attacker's going to do. We don't run Directory Buster. But from the defender's point of view, the defense, once we run Directory Buster, I'm using that as an example, we have to figure out the directories they're trying to get. Do we need to remove directories? Do we need to harden our stuff? If you see someone running Directory Buster, do we need to take their connection and put it in a tar pit? What do we need to do? Do we need to have an intrusion detection system, a signature written to throw it off? We have to have things written for this stuff. And the thing is, when I was in the special ops branch and the intelligence branch, one thing I used to teach people is you really have to think differently. I hate the phrase think outside the box. Right? I hate it. You know why? It's too limited. That is not what we need to do. If you only think outside the box, you need to get another job. Really, you need to get another job. Really, what you have to do is you have to think outside the box, you have to think inside the box, you have to become the box, and you have to assume there is no box at all. You have to think from the problem from every angle there is. And if you cannot think that way, you need to get another job. Anybody got questions?
Yeah, well, so I heard you spend some time around Lockheed and everything. I spent some time in DC doing cybersecurity stuff, and I was always amazed, if not a little terrified, how little these CISOs and CEOs knew about cybersecurity. And I was kind of wondering, any 15-year-old Russian teenager with, enough money to rent a botnet can DDoS anybody's website. And the public reaction to that is always like, they got hacked. And really it's the most, it's like there's too many people trying to get to a door. And I was kind of wondering, do you think that is causing a problem in the advancement of the cybersecurity field at all? The public's misconceptions about cybersecurity?
I think the media is contributing to some of the problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because like Daniel was trying to get something done for the Asheville Citizens Times, and they wanted a negative spin versus a positive spin. The reporter told Daniel that if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. So when you have an attack like that, if it's like that, and it draws that attention, right? It's something like this. You talk, for example, here, I was trying to rent an apartment here in Asheville, and going to Craigslist to rent an apartment here in Asheville. You know how many scams are on Craigslist for Asheville? Tons. And I approached the newspaper and the newspaper, Mountain Express, and WLS, and said I wanted to talk. This is a major problem. You should alert people about the possibility of these scams. And they said, we don't care about it. I'm like, what do you mean you don't care about it? So this is the issue. They pick these stories that are the best for them. They get the most attention. And some stories they don't go. Any other questions?
FireEye and some other intel people were saying that China is ramping down their APT activity. With people stating that we're getting into memory persistent attacks now. Do you see it as a move, I guess, of their attack vector, or do you see actually activity starting to dwindle with the peace talks with that?
No. It's like people said that when Stuxnet was found, probably all operations stopped. I doubt it. And China just figured out another way to do it, right? FireEye, you may catch something, just like Counter-Strike CrowdStrike may catch other things. No one's going to catch everything. And once you start catching one or two of these things and you start talking about it, the Chinese are smart enough to write new code that gets around anything that FireEye has. You don't think they bought FireEye and they bought CrowdStrike services and the other services out there and run it against those things? It's what most cyber criminals buy every antivirus piece of software to run it against and see what gets popped before they sell their wares out there. If they don't, they're stupid. So China's just changed their parameters and looking at different things right now. I would say they're still doing the same type of attacks. So.
You had said directly towards the end, one of the problems with organizations is really just poor processes in place. It seems like throughout the very talks, there's a lot of process that just isn't in place.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the biggest contributor to that problem for organizations? Just their
Management.
Management. A lot of it thinking that people just don't want to admit the fact that security is hard, and they're always looking for some magic application to take care of everything.
I think security is hard, but I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where we have a disconnect sometimes. I think some management think it's impossible. Plus, a lot of vendors come, and I'm a vendor. I'm a vendor too. I mean, I sell vulnerability intelligence for people, but you know, just buying my vulnerability intelligence will make you a little more secure, but you still have to do the work on your side, you know, to do the problem. So. But concerning processes, how many of you use like an ISO standard? The ISO standard. So my other company is called the U.S. Cyber Consequence Unit, and back in 2007, we released a cybersecurity checklist, and it went to become an international security standard. It's free. It's on the website. And it's in Semantic and several other companies put it in their compliance tools. It's a free checklist. At RSA this year, my business partner and I released a new checklist. And that checklist now is totally revamped. And that checklist is free. It was funded by some organizations for the research on it. But that checklist, if you haven't looked at it, it's 176 pages long, right? It sounds a little overwhelming, but the way we wrote the checklist is it's written from two areas. One is from the attacker perspective. You're an attacker. And the other one's from the defender. So when you go through this, it goes through the whole life cycle of security and supply chains and software development, networking. So I would recommend going out and looking at it and tell me how I can improve it. So it could help you with your businesses. And a lot of people have used it and commented it's pretty good. So, any other questions? Daniel's cueing me to get off stage.
Got one more.
I'll tell you, I was just going to say, if you go to any organizations that were doing a good job about, reporting on some of these events and doing it accurately, because that's another problem is just sometimes the inaccuracy of the data about these type of attacks.
I don't know if any organization is doing it perfect. That's the issue. I mean, CrowdStrike has their own way to talk. FireEye has their own way to talk. Eyesight Partners has their own way to talk. ThreatStream, and they just download everything free from the internet and reset package and sell it. I don't think anyone's doing it right. I mean, in order to do some of this research, it requires a lot of data. It requires a lot of effort to do it right and a lot of brain power. It really does. I mean, just to analyze a small piece of thing to try to link the Syrian Electronic Army with the Anon Ghost, or try to link this group over here with Hamas just based on the symbology. When I worked in the intelligence community, I also worked in deception operations and psychological operations, so I learned how to look at themes and symbols and stuff like that. So, I mean, just to link those pieces together, I mean, it's not easy to link all this data together. I mean, to find a piece of metadata that ties something together or find a log file that ties something together is not easy. And these groups like CrowdStrike, FireEye, Eyesight Partners, they're all in competition. They don't share their stuff. I mean, Daniel and I, when I was going through this stuff with the apartment scams here, I was trying to work with Daniel, who works at a bank, trying to work with him to go through the FSI sector, report a cybercrime. I eventually socially engineered 3 bank accounts from this criminal, telling him I couldn't use the bank account, I couldn't do this, and he just kept giving me new bank accounts over and over and over. And we tried to report him to Bank of America and SunTrust. That was an impossible task to report stolen bank accounts or bank accounts that were being used for cybercrime. It was impossible. So, any other questions? Daniel's saying get off stage.